that at the end.
Thanks.
So remind me if I forget.
Okay, thank you.
Great question, because you're going to run across that.
And the authorization to show unlisted property is F-107.
107. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Julian.
Mm-hmm.
So any other questions about the commission right now? Cool. Okay. So let's go to section 6, separate lease commission. So people tend to like just skip over this section, and I don't understand why. Because what this does is this protects you if, like, say you've exhausted the searches for the buyers, or something has happened financially and they cannot just purchase right now. So you need to find them a lease. Then this section protects you as far as a lease commission owed to you. And that does happen from time to time. Either they just give up or they run out of time and they need to get into something quickly. Then this protects, and you just put in, dollar amount, it really $1,000, maybe $500, that's just kind of between you and your client, what y'all discuss. But definitely put something in this section to protect you if they do go into a lease.
If you didn't fill this in, if you left it like 0 and NA, then you would need to do a exclusive tenant brokerage agreement.
Well, this is if, let's say they find a house for rent and the seller's willing to pay a lease commission. This is where you would fill this in.
Got it.
Yeah.
I have a question, Sheri.
Uh-huh.
What about if we put it TBD?
You cannot have TBD you cannot have to be determined on any blanks in a contract and it be an enforceable contract.
Okay, on any contract.
For any contract or any blank on any contract, you cannot have that and it be enforceable. Especially, I see people do that for attorneys sometimes in their purchase and sale, which that could probably slide. But if it is a negotiable item between you and your client, it cannot be to be determined, or it would not be considered enforceable.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Protection period. And we're going to go into this in great detail when we get to this section. But protection period, the length of the period, protected period shall be. And this is after your brokerage agreement has either terminated or expired. This section is to protect you in case your buyer goes and purchases a property that you introduced them to. You're protected for a number of days after the expiration of your brokerage agreement or the termination of it. I normally see 90 days here. Sometimes I see 180 days here. So you just need to figure out what works best for you and your business. There's no set number to put here. Sometimes I see 30 days. I would say 90 days is what I see is the most common. But I do like it when I see the 180 days. So it's whatever you can get your clients to agree to put right here in that section. And we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit more when we get to that section. So any questions? Those are all the blanks that need to be filled in on this buyer brokerage agreement. Are there any questions about any of these blanks?
And I have a question, sorry. On section 7, protect period. Let's say that during the 90 days you put it in there, we showed one property to this buyer who decided not to still working with us, or the lease, the brokerage agreement is expired. And they signed another broker agreement with another agent during that protected period. In that case, if they purchase the same property that I showed them, in that case, I still having the right to get my commission?
You mean that the buyer went with another agent?
Yes. If they sign another buyer's broker agreement with another agent during this period of time, and they showed the same property that I showed them,
I got you.
Decide to purchase it.
I think you're still protected. I really do. And we're going to talk about that section. We're going to read that section very carefully when we get to it. But I do believe that you are still, I think you're still protected in that. And we'll talk about that section when we get to it. Okay, Yvette?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions about the blanks and how to fill in the blanks on this? Awesome. So as with your purchase and sale agreement, your purchase and sale agreement is divided into 3 sections, A, B, and C. And your exclusive buyer brokerage agreement and your listing agreement are very similar to that, except we only have 2 sections, section A and section B. So now we're going to get into section B, whereas everything in section B correspond to the paragraphs of the blanks we just filled in. And kind of these are where you start to getting into your talking points. And this is where you want to highlight things for your clients to look at. So in this,
I think we lose you.
Sorry, hold on. Yes, you did. I gotta find her. Hold on. Sorry. My bad. Okay,
All right.
you should be back. I'm sorry.
okay.
I was trying to unmute some other people and I muted the wrong person. Sorry.
Oops. So we're going to get ready to get into section B, which are all the paragraphs that explain the blanks that we just had our clients fill in. So there's going to be some great talking points through here. The first one, this first paragraph, section B1, exclusive agreement. Look about middle ways through where it says buyer warrants that buyer is not party to any other current buyer brokerage agreements. It's like the third line down in that first paragraph. Highlight that because that is so important for you to make sure you ask your buyer, because basically it says buyer warrants that buyer is not a party to any other current exclusive buyer brokerage agreement, and that all previous exclusive buyer brokerage agreements entered into between buyer and any other real estate brokers have either been terminated or expired and have not been renewed. That is a very important question to ask your buyers when you start to work with them. So make sure and ask them that question right there. Okay, let's skip over. Let's go down to paragraph number 2, terms. So this is explaining the terms, how we mentioned a little bit earlier about your start date and your end date. And this is something I want to bring to your attention that a lot of agents don't really understand. And this is true both in your buyer brokerage agreement and your listing agreement. If you look at that second sentence, it says, if the property is under contract during the term of this agreement, but the term expires prior to closing, then the term of this agreement shall automatically extend through your closing date. So if you have a buyer, and let's say your buyer brokerage agreement expires May 15th, and you put them under contract this week, but you don't close till May 30th, then your buyer brokerage agreement is automatically extended to May 30th, to the closing date. Does everybody have that? So there's no need to do any amendments or any extensions or anything. And I get that phone call quite a bit. So just know that if you're under contract and your buyer's brokerage or your listing agreement expires during the contract period, that it has automatically been extended to the closing date. All right. So just kind of keep that in mind. Then let's look at section 2B, extension. So let's say, this is part 2 of that. If you've got a buyer and you went under contract and then the contract terminated, the number of days that you've been under contract with that buyer or your listing agent or your listing, this is true both with your listing agreement, then your buyer brokerage or your listing agreement is extended the number of days that you were under contract. Let's say we were under contract with our buyer for 10 days and they terminated during due diligence period for whatever reason. Then your buyer brokerage agreement is automatically extended for 10 additional days. So instead of expiring on May 15th, then you've got 10 additional days. So you've got May 25th, then is when your buyer brokerage agreement has been extended. So the number of days that you were under contract, your exclusive brokerage agreements are extended by those number of days, but you do have to send them written notification of that. And there's actually a form from that in your GAR form. It's called notification of, I think, extended days or something. But you just need to make sure and send them notification that, hey, I'm notifying you that per the contract that you signed, you agreed to, our agreement between us has been extended that amount of days. Any questions about that? Because a lot of people don't understand that either. Everybody got that part? Awesome, awesome. Number 3 really doesn't require a lot of explanation. It just reiterates that, hey, we're an independent contractor. Number 4 talks about the different types of agency. So is everybody clear on what designated agency is? Any questions about designated agency? That is when Jim's a broker, and then you and then another agent in this office have each have a side of a contract. One of you represents the buyer and one of you represents the sellers. That is designated agency. Are there any questions about that? Perfect. Dual agency, just so that we're on the same page, dual agency would be when you've got a listing and a buyer walks in and says, hey, I want you to represent me too on this transaction. And if both parties agree to it, then you can be in a dual agency relationship. Like I said earlier, we don't like it because it's really hard to represent somebody to the fullest if you've got to do that with both ends of the transaction. When this might come up is if you're hosting an open house. Say it's your listing and you're hosting an open house and a buyer walks in and they want to make an offer. The first thing you would ask them is, hey, do you have anybody representing you? If they say no, then the next question would be, would you like representation? And if they say yes, we highly recommend that you refer them to another agent and you not handle it yourself. Or if they don't want to be represented, you can always treat them like a customer, and there's nothing wrong with that either. You can fill in blanks. You can send them all the resources that they need to make educated decisions. You just cannot give your personal advice or your personal opinion.
And I think that's where people get confused with dual agency, because they think if somebody comes in and they want to put an offer in, that would be dual agency, and it is not.
No, you can treat them as a customer, and as long as the buyer is fine with being treated as a customer, and if they're an experienced buyer, they may be fine with that. Then there's no need to try to put them under a buyer brokerage agreement per se for this particular property. Now, if you can go show them another house, then definitely get them under a buyer brokerage and go find them another house if this particular house is not the right one for them. The only time I could plausibly see you being in a dual agent situation is if, for example, you've got somebody under buyer brokerage and you've been showing them for a while and haven't found the right house for them yet, and then you just happen to go on a listing appointment. You take the listing, you get everything signed, and then you sit back and you think, oh my gosh, this is the right house for my buyer.
That happened to me about 1.5 years ago, where I knew it was the right house for them, and then I showed it to them and it was. So I was in dual. That
would be the only time I can see you falling into a dual agency situation. And if that's the case, and like I said earlier, contact Michelle, myself, or one of your coaches, and we'll walk you through how to handle that. Do know that both parties have to agree to be in a dual agency relationship before you can move forward with that. And there's a separate form that needs to be signed in order for that to take place. So, and
it does get sticky.
It does get sticky. And I've only been in it once or twice, and you really have an uncomfortable feeling in your stomach the entire time because you want to do right by both parties. But then at the same time, you question if you are doing right, because you've got to be very careful about what you disclose and what you don't disclose. So any questions about dual agency?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
This is Janice. If you are hosting an open house for another agent,
mm-hmm.
and someone walks in and doesn't have representation, how would that work?
If it's not your listing, then yes, try to get that person under buyer brokerage and try to get that house sold.
Okay.
Your name's not on that listing agreement. You just happen to be sitting in the open house for the weekend for that agent, then go for it.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially if this house is not the right one, then I mean, that's the reason why agents, especially our newer agents, hold those open houses, is to collect those buyers. So yeah, definitely try to win that buyer over and get them as a client. Most definitely. Any other questions about this part?
Yes, Sheri.
Uh-huh.
I do. In this particular case, I have the seller and the buyer, but none of them signed the brokerage agreement. It's a father and son. What is the best for me in this situation? to represent the seller or buyer? What is the best convenience for me?
Seller on one
And
end and the son on the other end, or are they both on the same end?
it's well, actually, they are the same okay. The seller is his father, and
Okay.
he is living in that property, so he wants to sell his home to his son.
I got you. Okay. Who was your client first? The dad or the son?
The dad.
Okay. I would then, I mean, they already know probably each other's financial information to begin with. This is kind of a unique situation. I would represent these just for paper purposes. I would have the seller sign an exclusive listing agreement and then have the son sign a customer acknowledgement.
Great. Thank you.
Because I mean, it's really the dad that, you know, was your client first.
Yes.
So I would approach it that way. I mean, just make sure you don't tell the son too much about his dad's financial information if you can avoid that, and just fill in the blanks, because they probably have already discussed all the terms between themselves anyway.
Yes.
You're basically filling in blanks for them. Is that what I understand?
Yes.
Okay. If he's, especially if the son's already living in the house.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, and it may even be easier for them to go do a quick claim deed. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, have a seller sign an exclusive listing agreement and have the son sign a customer acknowledgement agreement.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have a question, Sheri.
Uh-huh.
Hey, it's Amy. If I myself am a buyer, am I feeling I don't fill out a buyer's agreement for myself, do I?
Yes, you do.
I do, okay.
Because you're still your broker. And so the agreement is between the client and the brokerage, not between, when you get a buyer brokerage agreement, it's really truly not between you and that client. It's between your client and the brokerage.
Yeah, I knew there was some box somewhere where I have to indicate that I myself am an agent.
Yeah.
But like
in the purchase and sale agreement.
In the commission part, do I give myself a commission? Or do I?
Are you the buyer or are you the seller?
Either way, I'm just asking for both, but I guess start off with buyer.
Well, you're an independent contractor, so we let you handle your commission, you know, how you see fit, whether you want to collect a commission or forgive a commission. I do want to let everyone know that when you first joined Keller Williams, one of our new agent policies is that you have to pay in $5,000 in company dollar before we can let you start forgiving your commission. So, and that takes about 2 transactions. All of our agents, regardless of who you are, you get 2 transactions a year where we will forgive your company dollar, and it's for personal reasons. Well, we will forgive your company dollar, but that doesn't kick in until you've paid $5,000 in company dollar first. Does that make sense? So if you've already had a couple of transactions and you've already paid in $5,000 towards company dollar, then how you handle your commission, whether you collect it or whether you have it forgiven, is up to you.
So am I understanding this right though? If I'm a buyer myself and I do charge the 3% commission and I do indicate that I'm an agent, then the seller is still going to be paying me a commission.
Well, they'll still be paying Keller Williams 3%.
Keller Williams, yes.
If you choose to collect it and not use it for a price reduction or something of that nature, then yeah, Keller Williams is still collecting that 3%, and then we take if you've already paid in a $5,000 floor, then we will give you back all that. We cut the check and we turn around and cut the same amount back to you. We don't take any company dollar out of it. You get 2 of those a year.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's for personal primary residence. It can also be for investment properties.
Okay.
And if you're already capped, then it doesn't matter. You get all your money anyway. So,
thanks.
Good question. Anything else about that? Perfect. All right. So, Section 5, commissions. A couple of key points here. If you want to highlight for your buyer, look at 5B, and it kind of reiterates what our script we kind of already talked about. While not required, the custom in Georgia is for the sellers to pay a commission. So that backs up what we've already explained to them previously when we were talking about commission on the front page. that Georgia's kind of unique, and it's not required, but it is customary in the state of Georgia for the sellers to pay commissions. So that kind of reiterates what we'd already explained to them. And then C, highlight number C, talks about for sale by owners. This just kind of backs up what we've already discussed with them about how to handle for sale by owners. So those are always good, they back you up, what you've already been telling them. This kind of backs up what you're telling them. Flip over to, let's skip down to section 4, talks about, oh, wait a minute, I got my pages out of order. Oh, okay. Section 6 talks about separate commissions on leases, which we kind of already talked about. Okay, let's spend some time on section 7, the protection period here. And I know it's boring to have to read a whole section of a contract, but we kind of have to with this one for it to make sense and for us to hit the key points here. So forgive me for having to read this out loud. In the event that during the protected period, as that term is identified, following termination or expiration of this brokerage agreement, buyer purchases, options, or contracts to purchase or exchange, or contracts to purchase ownership interested in a legal entity which owns, leases, or lease purchases any property which during the term of this commission was submitted to, identified, or shown to buyer by broker, for which the broker provided information to the buyer, you are protected. So in a nutshell, anything that you showed your buyer, whether you sent them emails, whether you walked them across the threshold, if you introduce that buyer to that property, you are protected for those number of days. Let's just say 90 days for the sake of argument, after the termination or the expiration of this agreement. So please, CYA, if they get automatic emails, if you've got them set up on an automatic email with FMLS and have them property sent, keep all those emails so that you've got proof that, hey, you introduced them to that property during your brokerage agreement. Back when I was actively doing real estate, we faxed. So I would keep every fax of every listing I introduced them to. And I know it's impossible today with the internet and all that, and the buyers have access to so many different avenues via social media and stuff to look at properties through realtor.com and all that good stuff, that it might be kind of hard to prove if you didn't actually walk them across the threshold of a property. So this is where your email communications with them about properties, I think, is key and can protect you. So for example, if you sent them an email with 10 properties for them that they might be interested in, list the addresses of those properties in your email, follow up with them via an email about each one of those addresses and let them tell you, yes, I'm interested. No, I'm not interested. This one could be a maybe, just so that we have a paper trail if we ever get in a situation where we have to prove that you introduced the buyer to that property. As much as you can CYA and create a paper trail of properties you've introduced to the buyers, the easier it will be to protect your commission if we're ever in one of those situations.
I print out the full agent sheets so that I have that information when I'm showing property, and I hold on to every single one of those, even though my file gets thick, but I hold on to every single one of them so that I've got proof that that's what I showed them.
Exactly. And I make notes on each one of those after we leave a property or after I'm done showing them, the day. Actually, I would print out all of them and I would have the buyer keep up with it and make notes on each sheet that they could take home with them that day after I've made myself a copy of that, just to have proof that, hey, we went into this property, we showed it, we talked about it. So yeah, that's a great way to create a paper trail. Yes. If you look further down into this paragraph, I'm trying to get through all the legal mumbo jumbo, but go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down where it says the term protected period, and it's in quotation marks, shall refer to the period following the earlier of either the expiration of this agreement or the date that this agreement is terminated upon the mutual written consent by both broker and buyer. So there are two ways to terminate a brokerage agreement. It can be mutual or it can be unilateral. But as long as this is terminated mutually, means both of y'all agree to terminate it and go your separate ways, or the expiration. And then it defines the expiration of this agreement. If this agreement is terminated by buyer without the written express consent of the broker, the protection period shall be the time period referenced above, plus the number of days remaining on your brokerage agreement. So if the buyer just up and decides to terminate, and you've got, let's say the buyer terminated their brokerage agreement today, and you had another 10 days left on the brokerage agreement, your protection period is extended the 90 days plus the remaining days on your brokerage agreement. Does everybody understand what that means? And that's only if it is terminated unilaterally by the buyer. Can you extend that protection period? And that's basically to protect you from the buyer and the sellers going behind the agent's backs and trying to work out a deal. That's the reason why all this protection period was put into place to begin with. So any questions about this? Because then it does, if you read further down into the paragraph, it explains who all is protected. Family members. So let's say a buyer terminates a brokerage agreement with you and then tries to go buy a property. If one of their family members tries to go buy the property, or an entity that owns more than 10% tries to go buy the property, you are still protected. So that kind of gets around that loophole too of, hey, well, I'll terminate this one, but then my sister's going to go buy the property for me. You are still protected. And that's what the rest of this paragraph talks about. Any questions on protection period, guys? And I promise, at least if you have a long, healthy career, you're going to need this protection period at some point, because it happens to all of us. Section C are just basically other terms and conditions. Not a lot to talk about. It just talks about the broker's, what my duty is to you. And if you look down, it talks about the buyer's duties to us. I always highlight, and I always talk about section G and H here, if you want to highlight those. And it reiterates, once again, we ask our clients to make sure they're not working with someone else, because I do have that phone call at least once a month, unfortunately, that I have an agent call that they've got a new buyer brokerage, but then another agent is saying that they have a buyer brokerage agreement with the same person. That old saying that buyers are liars and sellers are too, is unfortunately can be true, because buyers like to change who they work with sometimes, and they don't get out of their previous agreement with their previous agent probably the way that they should. So just it's always good to ask that question maybe more than once. Hey, are you sure you're not working with someone else? And then it talks about for sale by owners again. So this would be a third time that we can talk about for sale by owners and just the importance of them going through you first. All right, keep scrolling through. Page 4 is, in my opinion, is a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo that you definitely need to read through, but there's really not a lot here to talk about. Let's go to section 18. Unfortunately, we're at the time and age where it is critical that we talk about cyber fraud. It's on page 6. There. Yes, wire fraud. Unfortunately, this is something we've got to talk about to our clients and make sure, I know everybody's, especially right now, everybody's into wiring and their funds and all that good stuff, but there does come, with the convenience of wiring, does come that added risk of accounts being hacked. So we just got to make sure that cyber fraud is talked about at least a couple of times, and that's the reason why we have you guys have our client sign an additional wire fraud hold harmless, just because it is so prevalent right now. If you look at section 19, brochures, the really cool thing in your GAR forms is there's a brochure probably for every situation. My favorite right here is the ABCs of agency. I've got a couple of clients that print this out, and they have their clients initial it and they upload it into their command and their opportunities in command. And it just, it reiterates that we've explained to our clients what designated agency is, what dual agency is. There's the lead-based brochure. If the house was built prior to 78, if there's mold, radon, there's a good brochure how to protect yourself when buying a home. That's very helpful. There's a brochure to give your buyers if they're buying a house in a community HOA. Very good information. If they're buying a condominium, new construction, I mean, there's probably a good 5 or 6 on here I would give every buyer client I was working with, just to be a CYA. And it's just more information to give to your clients so they can be as informed as possible when they're going into a purchase, especially a new buyer. I mean, I don't think in this time and age, you can't give too much information, in my opinion, and you can't disclose enough. So I would pick or choose several of those, and those be like your every transaction forms. And then if you need the lead-based paint, or if you need the new construction one, or the distressed property one, you can always add those then. But I would say definitely the CB13, the CB16, and the 25 should be like on every transaction. And also number 1, the ABCs. Those 4, I think those need to be in your buyer presentation, in your buyer packet on every transaction. Any questions about those? Awesome, awesome. I skipped a whole page, didn't I? Yeah, it's okay. Any questions about that, guys, on your buyer brokerage agreement? Okay, let's go to the signature page.
Sorry, somebody's asking, can you list what 4 she just said?
Okay, it is, I would say CB01. I would say 13, 16, and 25.
All right, and then there was a question on section 6, and I'll go back.
Okay.
What goes in the second blank if we put a dollar amount in the first blank?
Section 6.
That's the lease commission.
Yes. If buyer leases a property or enters into lease during the buyer shall also pay brokerage separately. As follows would be like cashier's check, money order, wire, and when, like how we would receive payment and when we would receive payment. Like when they take possession, is usually what I would see there.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Okay, let's go to the signature page on this one because I do want to, this is very important. I know sometimes clients don't like to give what they feel like is their personal information, but we do have to have an address here where it says under buyer's signature, and it says buyer's address for receiving notice. We do have to have an address here. We do have to have an email address here, and we do have to have a fax, because these are the 3 avenues that the buyers are allowing us to send them notice. So when you're talking to your buyer clients, make sure that they put, let's say if they put a work email address here or a home address, make sure anytime you got to send them notice, you're using the address that they write on this form. So if they say they put a Yahoo account here, and then you call them during the day and they're like, oh, I'm at work right now, can you send it to this address instead? You cannot do that. You can, but it would not be considered legal notice. So just make sure that whatever address they put here, they understand that this is the address that legally we can only send notice to. Does everybody understand that? Same with fax number 2. And then of course the mailing address. So any questions on that? All right, guys, scroll down to the, does everybody know on this, you have to have your license number, the office's Georgia real estate license number, yeah, those are the 2 must-haves on this form, or your license number and the office's license number. Does everybody know the office license number? Yes, no? It is H-62960, I believe. It's been a while
Yes,
since
it
I've
is.
written an offer. Is that
It
it?
It is, and it's
Okay, perfect.
on the password sheet that Kimberly gives to them
Perfect.
when they join.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, guys, if there is not any more questions about this, we're going to skip over to the listing agreement. A lot of this stuff is reiterated, so we're going to fly through this in the next 10 minutes. But do scroll back up to the top real fast, Julianne. There's that same sentence in bold right there, guys, that you have to have their permission to represent them, and that's what this form is. This form is their giving you permission. Section 1 is property address. And then section 1B, legal description. Just like if you've ever sat in my contracts class and we talk about the legal description, same with your listing agreement. My first preference is number 1. And you're attaching that because you've copied the warranty deed or you've printed it off the county tax records. So that is always my number one, way I prefer you to do it, just because you eliminate the chance of transposing numbers or leaving a number out. So number 1's always my preference, but you've got 3 to choose from here there. If this is a condominium ownership, then you're going to check number 4. That's the section you got to use if this listing agreement is for a condominium. So if you're listing a single family or if you're listing a condominium, you use the same listing agreement. That used to be different, but they've combined it, which is awesome. And the difference is you would only fill out section 4 if this is a condominium. And if you see right there in bold, not to be used if property is a fee simple. If it's fee simple, you pick 1, 2, or 3. If it's a condominium, you pick number 4. Any questions about the difference between a condominium ownership and fee simple ownership? That was pre-licensed, but there may be some still questions about it. Does anybody have a question about that? The difference? Going once? Twice? All right, good. Okay. So go down to section 2, listing period. Just like in your buyer brokerage agreement, a start period and end period. Guys, it's strictly on what the seller's motivation is and how, based upon you doing your comparative market analysis, CMA for short, how quickly are things moving, in that particular neighborhood. So that's how you're going to do your listing period. Section 3, you're going to put the list price. That's what the sellers agree that we can market this property for. Section 4, seller does or does not authorize us to negotiate on their behalf. I have never, ever, ever, ever in my 24 years of being licensed had a seller not authorize somebody to negotiate on their behalf. So, but I guess legally, for legal purposes, it has to be there. No, section 5, marketing. This is where we are going to state all the multiple listing services. You've got FMLS, MLS, and KWLS. And this could be a script for you to use if you're competing with other agents. Everybody does FMLS, everybody does MLS. Only Keller Williams agents can have KWLS. So you need to use this as a script when you're competing with other brokers that, hey, we're going to put it not only in 2, but 3 listing services. So keep that in mind there. That could be a useful tool for you. Section 6, commission agreement. Once again, you can never say it's standard or customary. When you talk commissions, you can only refer to yourself or your brokerage office. So just for the sake of argument, we're going to put 6%. The seller agrees to pay us, Keller Williams Atlanta North, 6% when this property closes. If you look at section B, then we agree to pay a co-op broker. You can put 4, you can put 3, you can put 2.5. It is your call what you put in that second blank there. Now, I will say whatever you put in section B is what you put on FMLS. So, once again, this could be a strategy. If you're taking an expired listing and it's not been the price and it's not been, the photos, if you can't figure out why a house just has not sold, and it could be the super steep driveway or these, you know, 0 backyard, you may want to put 3.5% here or 4% here to give an incentive to get this house sold, and which would be just like offering a bonus to, you know, a buyer's agent. It's no different than offering a bonus, but just put it up front and market it that way. I mean, if you're willing to take a little bit of a hit right there on your end. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind when you're trying to strategize on getting a property sold that maybe has not sold for whatever reason in the past. So know that you can play with those numbers. They don't have to be set per se. Section 7, protection period, just like in your buyer brokerage agreement. You know, I see 30 days, I see 90 days, I see 180 days. And we will talk about protection period because there's one caveat to the protection period in your listing agreement that's not in your brokerage agreement. That buyer brokerage agreement we'll talk about in just a minute. 8's the same. Number 9, same thing, sub-agency.
Sheri,
Yes.
there was a question. Can we change the number later? So I think what they're talking about is in, Kat, are you asking about in the commissions? Or are you talking about, okay, in the commission. Can we change that later?
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe if the house doesn't sell for a certain period of time and maybe we change that number to just maybe get some more traffic into that area.
You can change whatever you need to change with this particular brokerage agreement as long as you and your sellers agree to it and there's an amendment. There's actually an amendment to your brokerage agreement. And then that's where you and your sellers or you and your clients would agree to change that. And then you can change it in FMLS.
And Sheri, can we mention the practice of if I have a listing and I show a buyer's agent's people putting on the listing that they only get 1%?
No, we don't. Our office doesn't support that.
And part of it is because this right here, you've already agreed that this is what you're going to pay him, so you can't discount it.
Right.
There could be lawsuits with your
be very leery when you see that. When you see that in the FMLS printout, that if we show your buyer, then your commission is being reduced, give me a phone call because we could probably argue that, because unless they have handled it properly, they legally cannot do that. So if you find yourself in that situation, I can't guarantee that we can get you more commission, but we can definitely try by asking certain questions of that brokerage. And if they can't answer those questions, then they legally cannot hinder paying you less just because they show your buyer. So yeah, give Michelle or I a phone call if you're in that situation. Does that answer your question, Kat?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Section 9 is the same. Okay, let's spend some time on section 10 here. Section 10. So these things do happen, and these are definitely questions you need to ask, is if this house is headed into bankruptcy, divorce, or other. And if that's fine, we can go ahead and still list the property, but then when we do get a contract or an offer, we've got to make sure we disclose. So if it's headed into bankruptcy and we need a third party's permission, or if it's headed into divorce and we need a third party's permission to move forward with the transaction, we've got to make sure that we put those as special steps in our counter, because the buyer needs to know up front before going under contract that there's going to require some additional authorization to be able to sell this house. So it could be bankruptcy, it could be divorce, it could be short sale. Seller's not on title yet because it could have been like a trust account or something, or a death in the family, and we've got to work out some title issues. So just make sure that you do not go under contract without disclosing, and the buyer is fully aware that there is going to require some third-party permissions to get this house sold. We had that situation not too long ago, and it was not pretty on our end because we failed to disclose. It was a divorce, and the judge had to be the final say-so, and we didn't disclose that. And the buyer had a right to the commission. I mean, we had a right to terminate, and the other agent had a right to get a commission paid because we failed to disclose that. So just be very careful about section 10. Ask those questions, and it's fine to go ahead and start marketing. You just have to be very careful once you get an offer that we disclose.
So I got a question real quick then. So if you're going on the listing, you know, the listing proposal there, and you know right up front already it's a divorce situation, then obviously you check that box right away. Like,
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and it depends on what stage the divorce is in. It could be, I mean, you could already have had the judges, what's it called? When the judge says who has a right to market the property and who, see if there's been I forgot what it's called. What is it called when the judge decides who, like the wife could have permission to sell it,
Yeah.
but the husband still might have to sign it, but the husband doesn't get a say so in terms.
Not like a judgment, but like a, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
But-
whatever that's called. I'm having a brain fart and I can't think of what it's called.
Okay.
But yeah, see if there's any paperwork, if it's, if it's a divorce, and ask to see it so that you know that you are communicating with the right party.
Okay.
And two, I mean, yeah, we had an ugly one in this office not too long ago where the judge gave the wife permission to pick the realtor, set the price, but the husband still had to agree to terms of an offer. And we went under contract without him agreeing to the terms.
Gotcha.
And it was a nasty divorce. And of course he got ugly and we couldn't get it worked out. And then buyer had to terminate and we couldn't get it closed just because he was a little mad that we weren't in constant communication with him from the beginning. And it's just because we didn't understand or we weren't fully aware that he still got to be involved in those decisions. Even though the wife got to pick the agent and the sales price, he had to be in agreement with the terms of the offer.
Okay.
So we kind of messed up on that one. So yeah, divorces can be tricky. So
do we have the right, Sheri, to ask for what the judgment is in regards to the real estate for the divorce?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. If we're getting ready to list your house, I think so. Yep. Because I'm not going to take, the spouse's word for it because they might not understand it either. So yeah, I would want to see the paperwork going forward with the divorce. So any other questions about that section?
Can you mention briefly about short sales?
Short sales are fun. They're not anything to be scared of. About 5-6 years ago, we had a lot of short sales, about 7 years ago. Everybody got kind of comfortable with them. If it is a short sale situation, definitely give me a phone call because we can definitely list short sales. There's a lot of misconceptions about short sales. They can close normally in 30 days or they could take 6 months to close. It honestly depends on how many lien holders are on the property. And I've had one that had 4 lien holders, but we still got it closed. It took some time, but we were able to still get it closed. But there are some misconceptions about how to handle short sales. So if you're going on a listing appointment and it's a short sale, still go ahead and take that listing and then give me a phone call and then I can walk you through some of the nuances about short sales. But yeah, don't run away from short sales. That could be, they're going to take extra work. I'm going to tell you that right now. They do take some extra time and extra work, but definitely don't run from them.
And can you give us an example of a seller not on the title when that would be appropriate for
a death, and maybe the will hasn't or the property hasn't been probated yet. So we had an agent who the husband died and did not have a will, and his wife was still alive, but it still had to be she's going to have rights to the property, but it still had to be probated, and that took an extra 45 days to get that one closed. So yeah, and it seems like we've had that one a couple of times here recently, unfortunately. But that would be a case when the seller's not on the title, or it could be an estate sale too. So flipping through the rest of this, listing periods, kind of just like in your buyer brokerage agreement, nothing has changed there. Look at under Section 4 negotiations, the seller's duties. Of course, you're going to go through A, B, C, and D with your sellers, but I always highlight B. I can't tell you how many times I've had agents call me that their sellers don't want to let people in. And I get right now is different, guys, that this is not normal. I'm talking back in a normal market. And I don't understand why sometimes sellers want to sell, but then they're kind of honored about when people come into the house. So I just highlight it and just talk about it real briefly and kind of make a joke about it, But it's just kind of a reminder that, hey, you do want to get your house sold, don't you? So let's make it as easy as possible to get buyers through the front door. Marketing, this talks about the listing and all that we do for marketing. This section gives us, Keller Williams, permission to market their house on every social media avenue there is. I've had a few times where the sellers don't want their house for confidentiality reasons out on the wide, for the whole world to see. And if that's the case, then that's really going to tie our hands on how quickly we can get the house sold. But this section 5 talks about, section 5A and B talks about it being out there for the whole world to see. And it also talks about once we stick it into the 3 listing services, FMLS, MLS, and KWLS, Realtor.com, Coldwell Banker, all these other sites, Zillow, will pull from those 3 listing services. And once that happens, we have no control over it. We don't have control how things are edited. So if they see something they don't like I say we do a price change or something, it may take a good 10 business days for it to filter through all the other 100 sites out there that their listing is going to show up on. So kind of set those expectations too, that we only have control over KWLS, MLS, and FMLS. Other than that, any changes that need to be made and how it's marketed, we really don't have control over that. And that's kind of what this section talks about to them. I'm trying to see if there's any other things we highlighted. Oh, section C, consent. So if your seller is on a do not call list, they give us permission to, even after the property is sold, we still have permission to call them. And they can't turn us in because we called them and they were on a do not call list. So kind of keep that in mind right there. That reminds them of that. D talks about lot boxes. I mean, I would go over this section in detail with your client too, that, hey, we're going to put a lot box on the property, but let's be strategic where we place the lot box. You're not going to, usually guard, handrails are one of the safest places to put it. You don't want to put it on a doorknob that can be unscrewed. So trying to be strategic where you put that lot box. Some agents don't like to, some sellers will only want to put the lot box out when they know there's going to be a showing, so they like to sit it outside. But how safe is that? Somebody can run off with the lot box and they've got access to your house once they crack the lot box open. So I always kind of warned against that strategy. Also with, this is a good time to talk about, hey, there's going to be people coming in your house. So let's go ahead and pack up the medicines that you don't need on a daily basis. Let's go ahead and pack up and hide that drawer you don't wear on a daily basis. Anything that's of any value, let's go ahead and get that stuff packed up. Because you're going to be moving soon anyways. And if it's not something you're using on a daily basis, let's go ahead and get it out of sight, packed away in a secure place. So it's a good time to have that conversation when you're going this section. Section 6, commissions. This is a great section, kind of talks about, we've earned our commission. And then this is a really good section. I don't spend a lot of time talking about this, but you need to know this. If you look at 6A number 3, if you present that seller with the perfect offer, the seller is legally required to accept it. And if they don't, you are still due a commission, and so is the other broker. And when I say perfect, the seller nets, the offer nets your seller the price on the listing agreement. There are no contingencies. The closing date is within 30 days, no more than 45 days. And it goes through, this section goes through what a perfect offer looks like, all cash. And if they receive a perfect offer, which I've had, happen before with our agents, and the seller legally cannot refuse it. And if they do, you are due a commission, and so is the other agent. So, like I said, I don't spend a lot of time talking about that. I definitely want them to read it, but just know that that is in there for your protection because you've done your job. So kind of keep that in mind there. Agency, we really don't need to talk about agency because we covered that in the buyer brokerage agreement. Let's talk about protection period right here, section 7. The only difference between this and in your buyer brokerage agreement is if you have a listing agreement and it was, and I want to make sure I say this the right way, so I'm reading through it real fast. If it was unilaterally terminated, let's say the seller just picked up and terminated our listing agreement with us and then went and listed it with another broker, and a buyer that looked at it while you had it listed, you are protected. So just kind of keep that in mind, okay? And so let's say that the listing agreement was mutually terminated or expired, and then they went and listed with another brokerage, your protection period, that 90 days protection period, does not protect you. So that's kind of the difference in this between your brokerage agreement. So you can have a listing agreement and it can either terminate or mutually terminate. It can either mutually terminate or expired. And then they go relist, you're not protected. That 90 days does not protect you. If it was unilaterally terminated and then they went and they listed with another agent and a buyer bought it that you were there, you were the procuring cause, then you are terminated. So kind of keep that in mind there. Does everybody understand the difference right there? That's what that section talks about. Go to section 5. Oh, look at page 5. Let's keep flipping through. I just want to point this out because this is different than your brokerage agreement. Page 5. Go back up to the top of page 5, Julianne. Right there, seller number 2, seller's disclosure. This clearly states that within 3 days of this agreement, seller agrees to fill out the disclosure statement and the lead-based paint disclosure if one's required, okay? So as a listing agent, just go and get these taken care of at the time of your listing agreement because they have to have it to us within 3 days anyway. So I bet y'all didn't know that was there, did you? Other than that, guys, there's really not any difference in the rest of this agreement between the buyer brokerage agreement and how you would handle your listing agreement. Are there any questions on any of this? It's so much hard. It's a little harder to do this contract stuff, and I can't see you like face to face and see your expressions. There you all are. Any questions on either one of these agreements, guys? I know it feels like we kind of flew through it, but it took
Sheri,
a
do
longer than
you want to take that poll to finish up?
Oh, yeah, let's do that. So did you give them the question?
There it is.
Awesome.
All right, everybody, chime in. What do you think? How many different brokerages forms are there in the GAR docs?
10?
Go ahead, put it in.
Oh.
There's a lot of you that haven't voted. Come on, let's go.
Heck, they're cheating. They've gone into FMLS and look it up.
Can I change mine?
No.
Well, and it's funny because I started looking at it and the answer can change a little bit. I mean, it's not a hard number, to be honest, because I started doing the research on it myself, and it's not a hard number.
Come on, get some in there. 10 of you, come on. I got 8 more that haven't voted.
All right.
All right, here we go.
So for the sake of time. So
here's the results.
Oh, cool. You know what? Most of y'all got it right.
Woohoo!
Whoever said 8, in my opinion, because there could be an argument on this, in my opinion, got it right. So the 8 brokerage agreements are your exclusive listing, your non-exclusive listing, your exclusive buyer brokerage, your non-exclusive buyer brokerage, your exclusive lease listing, and your non-exclusive lease listing, your exclusive tenant brokerage, and your non-exclusive tenant brokerage. So that's 8 right there.
That's right.
Now, there are 4 other forms that could be considered brokerage agreements, but it's your authorization to show unlisted property that you use for a seller who's a client, who's a customer. Then you have your customer form for buyers. You have your customer form for tenants when you're treating a tenant as a customer. And then you have a lease management agreement, which we do not allow in this office, so I'm even scared to bring it up, but it is in your forms packet. But you'll never, ever, 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 ever use that form. So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You can really say there's 12 client agreements, but there's 8 legit brokerage agreements. Everybody got that?
Right.
Any other questions, guys, before we sign off? I know Jim wants to have his desk back.
Thank you so much, Sheri. And
Thank
thanks
you,
everybody
guys.
for coming
Have a
in.
good day.
Appreciate it.
All right, bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Love your hair.